Wing Women Weekend Nashville! Woohoo! Our next Wing Women Weekend takes place in Nashville, Tennessee, January 17th to 20th, 2025. Are you a woman in the LGBTQIA+ community who is looking to make friends, relax, unwind, and have fun? You have a burning desire to be a part of the queer community, but you're too shy to go out on your own. If so, then this event is for you. Join your Wing Women hosts, Anne-Marie Zanzal and Tonda McKay, for some socializing, Southern barbecue, dancing at the Lipstick Lounge, one of America's last remaining lesbian bars, and much more. This is the perfect opportunity to step out of your comfort zone and make new queer friends, aka your Wing Women. Spaces are limited. Don't delay. Reserve your spot today. For more information and to sign up, visit www.wingwomenweekend.com. That's wingwomenweekend.com. Hey queer friends, are you ready to be inspired? Welcome to Season 5 of Coming Out and Beyond, a podcast that shares stories from the LGBTQIA+ community. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
Have you ever been so intrigued with somebody that you have to reach out right away and meet them? Well, that happened to me recently, and I want to introduce you to somebody that I am super intrigued about what they do. So at 19, Gwendolyn Brooks, who was the Poet Laureate of Illinois, granted Duane Scott Cerny, who's our guest today, and offered him a full poetry scholarship to Northeastern Illinois University. This event greatly altered his life. He would eventually turn poems into lyrics, record his work, launch a record label to surprising success, and even sign to French music label Le Disque de la Mort. At 30, he discovered the vintage business and has multiple stores to this very day. Currently, the Broadway Antique Market is now recognized as a national vintage shopping destination, heralded from O Magazine to the New York Times. Still, having his first book, Selling Dead People's Things, named Top 20 Memoir of the Year by The Advocate, remains a credit that he is very, very proud of. Duane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And that's what hooked me, selling dead people's things.
I must confess, I did not come up with that title, but it's a phrase that vintage dealers often use.
Well, and I understand that. I've
Yeah.
done a lot of I've had lots of elders die. I've done a lot of estate sales. So I understand. I mean, I've, cleaned houses for estate sales. So I understand that. So really intrigued about that part of your life. But then I got to realize that you've done a lot of other things too, as well. And I would love to hear your story. So the first question I ask my guest is, Duane, tell me your story.
So, well, I was born in Chicago in 1959, and actually a suburb just outside of Chicago, and that will be relevant in a moment. My parents were Protestant, and my sister, when she was born, she's 9 years younger than I am, was born with a neuroblastoma tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to some, it's bad. It's bad then,
Mm-hmm.
it's bad now. They were just given, she's gonna die. And she had a friend at work, and she says, I know this priest. You should see him. They go, oh, a priest. They went to see this priest, and this priest said, you know what, we're gonna pray for you and your child every Sunday. And if she comes through this, you need to agree to convert.
That's a hard bargain.
That's a hard bargain. And you know what? She did,
Mhm.
which is, even now, it's, I think 40% of all children die. But back then, it was nearly 100%. My point being is, so they're all, I'm the only born Catholic, which, which, how religions are. So there's kind of like a higher bar for me, right from the get-go, which also means there's going to be a higher bar of disappointment that would be headed their way. So, my parents were of they're Depression era children, and
Mhm,
that
mhm,
makes a difference. You know,
mhm,
my mother had lived in just various church basements as a child. It was
mm.
terrible. So when they were able to, my parents pull themselves together and get their first house and live the American dream, it meant a lot. I mean, they worked as they were middle class, go to Catholic school, and very decent people. And I just want to be that I want to set it up for that. So, and I've listened to a number of your other podcasts, and we should get to the meat of the story. So, in 1978, and I'm 19, something like that. And I always knew I was different. I was attracted to my male teachers. Always like those
Mhm.
older men, right?
Well, which is
You
really
know,
normal for
just
queer kids.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's normal.
That's normal. So I with 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 uh, with uh, other children, I always say I was never in. I
Mhm.
was always just flamboyant me.
Well, and so I've read your book, and in your book, you talk about how you charmed the bullies. Like
Yes.
you've always been like, so what has been really a big learning curve for me, Duane, is because I've had lots of gay men on this show now. It took till year 3 to get them on, but or for me to have them on, but year 3, I had started having guys on. And I have found from so many of my men that, they were really bullied as children.
Mhm.
Um, almost all of them to a T. And you took the charming way out. I love that story about the Playboy magazines.
Mhm.
And I would love for you to, and I just got my ex mother-in-law was asked to pose for Playboy by Hugh Hefner.
Wow.
And she was 6 weeks pregnant and she didn't. But that's my claim to connection to Hugh Hefner, who's a really oily and disgusting human being. But
Turns
back
out,
then,
yeah.
I mean, I understand. I mean, you and I are about the same age. I
Mhm.
understand like who he was back then. So how did you charm the bullies?
Yeah, there's a story. I'm not sure if it's in the first or the second book about being uh, pinned to the floor in the locker room.
No, that wasn't in
Is
your
that one in?
first book.
Okay,
So it must be in
it's
your
in the
second.
second book. So yeah, so I had a serious bully in high school who just it was just one of those throw you in your locker and leave you there and
Mhm.
knock me around all day. He just and he loved to show off that he could do this in front of his buddies.
Mhm.
It was bad. But I was kind of prepared because we could talk about it later. But from all the bullying I'd had from years earlier, so it
Yeah.
wasn't my first bullying rodeo. And uh, he gets me at one point. There's nobody else in the locker room. It's like, oh, how do I get away from this guy? And I'm on the floor. I always say it's like a butterfly, like pinned to the board, and he is on
Mhm.
top of me. This 6 foot something.
And you were tiny, right?
I was
You were,
tiny.
yeah,
I'm like barely 5 feet, 100 pounds.
yeah.
So I mean, he's this guy, and I cannot move.
Mhm.
And you can just imagine that position of someone who's just holding you down, and I cannot move. The only part of my body that could move was my head, and I decided to kiss him. And I don't recommend this for anybody. I think this was really stupid, but in the moment, that was my, pardon the expression, knee-jerk reaction, right?
Mhm.
And he couldn't move. He really
Mhm.
couldn't move the way he positioned himself as quickly as he would like. And let me tell you, I kissed him. I went for it. He wasn't bad looking at all. Um, and there was the shock of it because it was like, well, what else is going to happen? He's going to knock me around, right? And he just jumped off and shocked and grabbed his clothes and ran away. And here's the thing. After that, I would see him in the hall. He's got his arm around me. I'm his little buddy.
So do
I
you
don't know.
think it was yeah. So,
Yeah,
a lot of times people that act out like that often struggle with the queer, gay feelings themselves. So,
absolutely.
so
Uh,
did he ever come out?
well, nobody got a classmate of mine pregnant. So he's a horny little fucker. uh, yeah, so in his instance, I'm not so sure about that. I do think though it's men using their power against women is all too typical.
Right.
And they use it against men, and
Mhm.
and in that one was, and that story is called "Beaten by the Beautiful."
But that was actually quite, first of all, very brave. I mean, I know you
Yeah.
did it in the moment, so it wasn't like you were planning, like,
Nah,
it's
yeah.
very brave because he could have beaten the crap out of you.
Oh, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
he kind of had before, so it was like, and yeah, this sounds terrible, but it was a very sexualized thing to begin with.
No,
So,
it was
you know,
trying to
so
escape.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but his reaction to it is what this, because after that, nobody beat me up. The other guys were like, no, this is, yeah.
So
That
can you
yeah.
share the Playboy thing, like with the boy, like in your first book, you write about how you became, like, you were a hustler. You've always been a hustler.
Yeah,
You've
apparently.
always made money.
Yeah,
You've always liked old things.
yep.
I mean, at the time when you were selling the Playboy, they were not old things, but I mean, in my generation, all the boys had Playboys. I remember all that stuff. And so you used to get Playboys.
Well,
For,
I knew that my classmates that their fathers had Playboy magazines. So you'd visit somebody's house and say, I want to see my dad's collection. It was never theirs because we're talking about 17-year-olds, something like that.
Right,
Things
right,
are
right.
different, but so when yeah, I'll quickly tell that story. So my father was a photo engraver, and they actually did the production work on Playboy. And one night he brought home all these proofs of Playboy models in different sizes, right? And shows them to my mother. Again, let's go back to the Catholic upbringing, right? Who was horrified that he would bring these home. And he was just so proud of himself. Look at what he's explaining it all technically, what he was able to do with these images, right? She didn't appreciate that, and he threw them in the garbage. And my mother had said, I just threw out an angel food cake. Get it out of that trash can, which I thought was just hilarious. So again, so he takes it out of there and throws it in the garbage outside. And then that evening, Duane tippy toes out there. I take all the images. I bring them to school. And then I set up this business where I would trade an image for like 8 or 10 Playboy magazines, because those are much more saleable. These guys aren't going to have 50 or $100 for an image. If I had them now, my God, they'd sell for much more. But somebody would have $10 for a magazine. I never asked how they got the magazine, but we knew they were getting them from their father.
Can I just say, Duane, that's really incredible, because you were only like 15 or 16 at the
16,
time.
yeah.
And you, like most people, would have just sold the images and not have like thought, oh, wait a minute. I mean, like, it's almost like this selling other people's things is like in your DNA. That's what I thought was really, you were very entrepreneurial. Like I would have, like, if that was me, I would have just sold the images, but you were like, okay, how can I make more money from this?
Yeah. And so I kid, but not by much. So I have all these musical posters, Broadway shows in my locker. All those came down, and it became the little Playboy outlet. So I always say, okay, I wasn't selling drugs in school. I was making straight boys happy.
You were. Good for you.
I was performing a service.
You were performing a service. I agree.
Was. And it was just funny to see. Young boys, they just get all standing from foot to foot, getting nervous and which one you're going to buy. I love that. So it was really, I look at it now as a form of manipulation. That's what I was doing. But it set me apart, and it also got people to recognize me for that and leave me alone. It would be just, so the fag is selling Playboy magazines. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm still fine with that.
Yeah.
Not so much the fag word, but in high school at the time, you know,
That's what it was.
that's what it was.
So you go to, so let's skip forward. I wanted to get a little of your background in. So let's skip forward to 1978. And so, you grow up in this religious home. I grew up a Catholic school girl too. I understand all that. Both my parents were World War II veterans. I mean, I get it all. They all went through I get it. So, being gay was like not something you could do, but your parents were actually pretty good, right?
Yes and no. So that's why I wanted to set up, say that they're really good people. So some of the things which followed weren't so great. But part of my coming out, I almost feel like it was like a marketing plan for myself and how I was going to do this, is they had changed the laws for a while in Illinois. So at 18, you could actually go to bars. So I took in Chicago, there's a big bar, dance club called the Bistro. It was downtown, and it was, if you're familiar with that. And it was very la-di-da. I mean, celebrities would come into town and go, oh, there's Barbara Eden. I mean, it was that. So I took my sister. So, and it was a mixed bar and a dance club, but it was definitely men dancing with men, women dancing with women, and straight couples. I can't emphasize enough just what a really classy place this was compared to I didn't take her to the dungeon across the street. That would be for me later. But and so it was like, because I knew she's so close to my mother, this will be a way to go like, oh, like this. Well, that's what I thought was going to happen. So basically, this is around this same time of year. It could have been a little closer to Thanksgiving, and we're in the kitchen, and and my mother's cooking, and I thought, okay, we're just going to do it. After all these questions, why don't you bring assorted girls around? Yeah, like that. And I tell them. And it's there was a lot of no, you're not. Just no, you're not. No, you're not. My father was I wouldn't have a fag for a son, so you're not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's where they went. That's where they went. That was their experience. I got some story about how some queer touched my father when he was in the army, and that kind of just and my dad was a very soft-spoken, wonderful man, and so that was really his only exposure to it, and occasionally seeing. So you might be doing this for work, something that was very adult, but that didn't transfer over into anything gay related, for sure. Okay, so this ends up being like a number of weeks of just crying and then saying things to me, just your typical, it's a phase, with the right woman. My mother had one, which she really meant, was like, you're not to move out of the house until you get married. And again, to a woman, 1978. Okay. We're nearing Christmas, and it's 1978, and about barely 2.5 miles from where we live, they start unearthing the bodies from John Wayne Gacy's house.
Oh my goodness.
Well, and that went on for weeks. And it was on the news constantly, of course. It's horrific, of course. And it wasn't any of the young men that went to my high school. It was like, one over. And again, I just have to say, these were not rent boys. These were, yes, some were runaways, some were not. And when he ended up getting caught, it's because he killed a boy who lived in the neighborhood. Well, terrible timing. Duane has terrible timing, because it just goes from bad to worse. In that there was, I remember one of the phrases was, well, if you're not one of the boys buried in the basement, you're the guy who did it.
Oh my goodness.
And no, no. And I'm with, well, you know what? You realize he's married and his wife was living there through a lot of that. And so I said, there are these heterosexual men, or maybe he's bisexual. There's nothing to do. I mean, they're really intelligent people. My mother would read the newspaper, cover to cover. So, but getting them to like the truth of this was just, 19-year-old man shakes fist at clouds.
Right.
I wasn't getting. I just didn't get anywhere with that. It was traumatic for all of us.
Well, that was yes, that is trauma. Yes,
that's the proximity to it was just. It was just horrific,
Oh, I'm sure.
And again, when something's like a local story, and it's that close, here in Chicago, but we were really close. And I knew exactly where it was. We all knew exactly what street. Oh, Summerdale. Yeah, I know that. That's where we cut down to when we go to Park Ridge. It was just like way too close. Of course, I still living at home. I'm going to college. I meet a boy. We pretty much fell in love, and I bring him home because I'm like, I'm not giving up on this.
Good for you.
And he's Jewish. It's like I'm doing this to them intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's not enough. You're putting this thing out there that the stage you're going through, and I'm going, I mean, I was maybe 12, and I had not only did I have white fur rug on the floor in my bedroom, a white fur bedspread, I had white fur drapes.
Well, you write about that in your first book. So it's like, I'm wondering, are you like, I mean, like in reflection, being like, Mom and Dad, don't you see me?
Right.
Like, don't you see me? I mean, like, I am like,
and
it's not like I was like, I surprised you at 19. I had fur drapes.
Fur drapes, which you helped me buy. And you're buying me, and I really like clothes. And again, I like, I like soundtracks from movies. That was something.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always, it's South Pacific, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Lost Horizon, because they're going to drive them crazy playing the soundtrack from Lost Horizon. But the thing was that all the other horrible things that happened in terms of being bullied, and an example would be one time some kids went, and we had one of those mailboxes that your mail went right into the house, right? Mm-hmm. So they threw firecrackers in there.
Oh, wow.
Comes out, we're having dinner. We're having dinner in the dining room. Firecrackers go off and set the drapes on fire.
Mm-hmm.
We put them out. But the thing is, there was always vandalism. There was always shit going on. Puncturing our car tires, breaking off mirrors, disconnecting the drain spouts to the house, right? Mm-hmm. And my folks would be like, why is all this happening? It was like an Italian-Polish neighborhood, and we were, Danish and Czechoslovakian. Mm-hmm. So, okay, it was that, but it wasn't that.
Right.
It was me. It was me. It was always me. Right. Is why they were doing this. Then they would not make that connection. Simply would not make it. And of course, I'm feeling every time one of these things happen, I feel terrible. I mean, the drapes are on fire, like it's my fault. It's because
it's not your fault.
No,
it's
in the moment, moment, it's just I look back and go, geez, I was strong to get through that, because this is physically things are happening, to myself, and I was always terrified something happened to my sister, and she's 9 years older, but we were just really, she's like my second mom. We were very, very tight, and so when I came out, it was just, don't you see this and connect the dots? This is what's going on. Well, the Jewish boyfriend was like just the end. I mean, my mother didn't get out of bed for like 3 days, and at 21, I moved in with him. And so we didn't. I would call. And my mother wouldn't speak to me. My father would talk to me briefly,
Mhm.
briefly. My sister more so, but it, it took years.
Mm.
It took years for my mom to come around. My father really never did. Um,
Mhm.
so so the coming out story when and thank you. Again, as you said, I've not included this. It's the first time I ever told the story. I tell
Mhm.
other people's stories.
Mhm.
I tell other people's stories.
Well,
So
that's what I said to you because I
yeah,
was reading your book. I read your book and I'm like, there's not too much gay stuff in here. And you really didn't talk about the coming out story of what happened with your family. And
no,
my heart goes out to you. And so, like a lot of gay people, I'm sure you started building your own chosen family.
absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
when I think I say that in the book. It says I was so excited meeting my first lesbian. and it was just like, okay, we were thinking we wouldn't have anything to talk about. We had plenty to talk.
Right. Oh, you, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then again, and Northeastern was great. It's a teachers' college because it was every type of person imaginable. You know, it starts colors,
Mm-hmm.
nationalities, and sexualities. And so that was such an eye opener. Going, yes, okay, college is more what I had hoped would be what like real life would be when you get out into the real world. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, but um, it's it was that's why it was funny when the Advocate picks this up as a memoir of the year next to John Waters.
Mm-hmm.
I need to say that. That's my favorite credit. So because it's clearly it's a gay it's a gay book, but the first story, which was in the New York Times, was someone else's coming out story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I never want to give this away. I try to write when the story works this way in an O. Henry type style. So that
Mm-hmm.
I want there to be a surprise ending because there was a surprise ending to me, and I want to share it with the readers. And so and that story is called "Traces of a Man Who Disappeared." So
Mm-hmm.
anybody can Google that, and it's out there on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, it's another one of these where what I thought was happening wasn't what was happening.
Right.
And also what I kind of appreciate about just the business that I'm in is that, I mean, that happened to be an estate and the person had passed, but oftentimes it's not. And I get to wear all these hats.
That was actually, I read, that's the first chapter of the book.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not going to give it away. It's actually quite a
Thank you.
poignant story because I went and I told my wife after I got done with it, I said, this is a really good book because I read that first chapter and we'll put the link and we'll find it and put the link when we publish this podcast so that people can go read it. But it was very touching about this because I work with people that come out later in life. And so was very, very touching to me about and how this person was to be able to maintain his dignity or her dignity. And it's just a great story. You told it very, very well. Very well.
Well, and let me tell you, to get something in the Times, it's like an atomic colonoscopy.
Yeah.
As far as fact checking.
Yes.
And this had
I've been in
happened
the New York Times, so I know.
Well, you know, okay, you know. Yeah, it's going like, oh, you're kidding. Okay, one more thing and one more thing. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
to get and as well it should be. But even at the time, that was, and I probably I won't get into the whole the backstory of that particular story, but other than the fact that it was rewritten dozens of times before it finally gets to that version.
Yeah.
That one that had to just hit. But also that I knew I was onto something because after
Right.
that came out and that was a pretty early conversation about that topic. I think it's safe to say it was before other famous people would transition and
Yeah.
whatever their
Mhm.
experiences. So they got a lot of emails about it, a lot
I
of
bet.
messages about it, but then it made me think, wait a minute, that's what people want to read, and it would be flash forward a bit to Antique Roadshow. Yeah, everything's about what's the value, but secondary. But sometimes it's really the first thing you want to know is how did you get this item? Where did it come? Where did it come from?
What's the story?
What's the backstory?
Well,
What's the backstory?
as someone who's watched every season of Antique Roadshow, I completely. This is why I'm nerding out with you, because
nerd away.
I love that. And then I'll tell you a really cute story. My son, when he was like 3 or 4, we watched Antique Roadshow every week. And so he had an Antique Roadshow dance that he would dance when the music came on for it. And it just like, to me, to this day, I think about that. You know, he would go like this with his hair. Yeah. So let's talk. So you are someone who is passionate about other people's stuff and passionate about creating space for community, because your community, besides the queer community, is like the people that are into antiques and into collecting. And you gave me a really good perspective about it that I never really thought about before. But you have clients that you actually like really have a lot of joy in finding. You wrote about railroad schedules, and you had a lot of joy finding this one collector, this I can't say ours, this railroad schedule and everything like that. And what is the best thing about what you do?
Well, making people happy, which I know might sound rather general, but to your point, and I remember that was artificial limbs and railroad timetables.
Yes, that's the chapter.
That's the chapter. And what that is that people come in and say, this is what I collect, this is what I like. And so I would do a want list. It's okay, let's get this in the computer. And whenever you could match it up. And I learned this a long time ago, was that if you could find really like to befriend somebody, you really want to get in good with them, you find out what they collect. And if you find something that they don't have, it opens a door. Just opens the door. And that nothing that you could get at Costco,
Walmart. Yeah.
Walmart is going to open a door like that.
Right.
So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something expensive either. It could be something inexpensive, just difficult to find. Yeah.
What is the thing that's the hardest about your business? Like you love to collect, you love to make people happy. Like, what's the hardest part about it? Like you've been doing this a long time, you're probably like at the point where like, oh God, do I have to do this again?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, probably a lot of little. It's like a lot of little things.
Yeah.
There's the again, like people happy. Counter that is disappointing people. And I actually told people I've been disappointing most everybody since 1990, because that's when we opened up our first store. It was our first store. That was actually our little line, disappointing because well, why don't you have that, right? Because people have to have this immediacy of Amazon and really almost anything else that you buy online that you could just and you get it like that, right? And that doesn't even necessarily work on eBay or Etsy. Yeah, with buy anything, because they're going like, no, I want it now. I need, I need a suit of armor tomorrow. Those kinds of things. Well, and then explaining like why that's just not going to be happening. And I will say, oftentimes, I'm a big fan of younger people. Younger people have brought this business back. It's a green. You have a small carbon footprint. Young people totally get in it, and that's why mid-century modern doesn't go anywhere. That's why 60s through 90s stuff is hot. But people get actually angry when you don't have what they want, and you could say, well, screw them, but you can't. It just be like, I rarely see those. I wouldn't know where you could find that, and if I do know, I would absolutely tell them. And sometimes I do. It wouldn't be something that we would carry, but it's this immediacy of that. They've got this scratch and they want it itched. right now, and I can't,
Mhm.
and I can't. So there's a lot of disappointment
Mhm. Yeah.
that they're very vocal about, and not understand, well, why don't you have a microscope, and then, oh, we do, but this isn't the one that I want. So it's more that it's funny because it's not so much you think it'd be like, the money. It's finding the actual, objects that they want, and some people are I mean, there's a line someone told me. I try to write these things down when somebody said to me, "Oh, well, I'm looking for something that I don't think was ever made."
Yeah.
I, I, are you just walking around disappointed 24/7? With that kind of request, or with the one was, I'm looking for something shaped like a brick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I found the things that were shaped like a brick. I mean, it could just be anything. It's the kind of business where just anything can happen. And I also feel, as far as like dealers, it correlates much more just to circus people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
going from town to town while doing shows,
Yeah,
right?
I
You
get
pick up
that.
your
I would
goods and
say
you
that.
go on. Yeah, it's kind of a carnival thing, And there's a there's a dark side to carnivals.
Well,
Let's be
yeah,
honest.
there
Let's
is.
let's
Yeah.
let's let's be honest. So so these things are, in some respects it's a very unhealthy business because your hours are, you have to, you get up at 3 in the morning you get into some estate sale,
Yeah.
or some flea market. You can bring a flashlight. I mean, it's like you're like a vampire. It just it kind of does, it just doesn't. It's really like a 24/7 business. So and we all eat terribly. Well, what's there to eat at 4 in the morning at a flea market? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, corn dog.
Nothing.
Yeah,
Maybe
really
a corn
nothing.
dog. Yeah.
If you get coffee, you're but
So,
I know,
so in
I
your
yeah, yes.
so in your book, so you are a gentleman of a certain age, and you know, you in your book, again, just very quickly, you talk about losing a lot of people. Like it's literally like maybe a couple of sentences.
Mhm,
You know, I know what you're referring to, and you're referring to the AIDS epidemic.
mhm,
And you, within, like you said, within a couple of years, you lost almost everybody in your life.
mhm.
And I have people fill out, before they come on, what do you want to talk about? And you said AIDS, so that's why I'm bringing this up. Um, as somebody who was a grief counselor for years, I would love to talk to you a little bit about that time. And what was that like for you? And is there any way you can compare it or to another pandemic we just went through, which was COVID? I mean, it was much more localized in with the HIV and AIDS.
It's um, so I lost my partner, not the Jewish gentleman who I mentioned with, who is now happily married to a woman, and I'm seeing him next week for lunch. So
Oh, how cool!
that's wonderful. So we stay in touch. But my second partner was John, and and we were together for 5 years, and he passed at 28.
Mm-hmm.
And I was four or 5 years older. At the time, I was doing the record label, and it was an all gay label. I had a business partner, David Bell, and we created this record label doing house music, and we didn't realize it was very early in the house music scene coming out of Chicago. And all but one person that, uh, well, myself and one other person I'm aware of that are still alive. Um, uh, so it's people that I not just that I work with, but that I'm friends with, I'm partners with, and then even say the record label, and then their partners.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes on and on. And David was really into gay media, or like
Mm-hmm.
early gay media. So and we had the record label. So we would get gay newspapers from all over the country. And just, we heard about GRID, the first.
Well, gay related.
Yeah.
Gay related
immune
deficiency or something like that.
Yeah, when they called it GRID, and I think one of the first celebrities to die was Claus Nomi, the performance artist, and I remember David saying to me, "Well, this is going to kill me." I mean, he just reads the article and he goes, "Well, this is going to kill me." And at that time, it was 30 people in New York. It was very much a coastal thing. But because these newspapers,
I remember that. I do remember that. I remember reading about GRID in the New York Times. I was like 19 or I always read. So I was like 19, 20 years old, and I was really interested in, I was fascinated by it. So I remember that, I remember that.
It felt like, and we even talked about it at the time, like it was a wave.
Right.
and we went, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. And it did. And then at the time that my sister passed, so there was other deaths. It was too much.
Of course.
The label folded because it was just me. I mean, I tried, and then it was just, I don't know why I'm trying it. It's not fun anymore. And I've lost my friends. So in that, there was it was also a professional loss, because we were doing so well, and we ended up being a small piece of history in that story, and we connected the dots. And as far as putting it out, I mean, we were pressing vinyl. Everything else was mixtapes. So that was early, and also those records now are they're very expensive on Discogs. And so what's funny is I actually created with my friends collectible. We created something that would end up being collectible. So
that's so sweet.
Isn't that kind of crazy?
Yeah.
So when move forward. When COVID came along, I'm like, oh yeah. So here we go. With AIDS, it was about behavior. You'd hear this word all the time, and I would talk to my parents, and they'd be like, do you have that? Well, because when David got it, David had been in the house, and again, you remember this, but just for our younger listeners, there was a time when is it in your saliva? Is it in your tears?
Yeah, they didn't know where it was.
They didn't know, and for a long time, is oral safe sex?
Yeah, it was like 4 years.
Yeah, it just went on. There just was no information, on that. There was. It was zip. And the community had to get together. Larry Kramer, God bless him.
Act up.
Right?
Yeah. Which
may very well be what we'll need to do soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Young people. And when COVID came along, as I said about behavior, because it was like, well, isn't behavior, not being vaccinated? It's a choice. I don't know if it's a good choice or a bad choice. I guess we'll find out, depending who you were in contact with. But something so easily spread. And there were, again, you could say, well, there's things you could do. There's things, as you could say, well, if you're not having anal sex, but don't get a blood transfusion. And, and then there was just a lot of, I don't say misinformation. There was just there was really no information.
Well, because they weren't doing anything about it.
No.
That's why.
No,
they weren't doing it.
Right.
He didn't even say the word.
From top down. Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't until the gays got together and formed ACT UP and other organizations that changed it and had them find. I mean, believe it or not, Anthony Fauci's a main character in the AIDS drama too, because but luckily Anthony Fauci had an open mind and eventually changed his mind and did the work that he needed to do to be, he helped curate or not curate, but helped, put it into a state where it became a more manageable disease.
Right. And he himself says that the research that was done during that time advanced the COVID vaccine.
Right. Can I ask you how has having so much loss so young? I mean, you were a baby. I mean, 28 is you were 32, 33, that you are a baby still. How, going through something like that, how has it shaped you?
Well, I have a few friends that are my age or a little older, and we talk about this. You really felt that you were going to get it. You're just going to. Your days are numbered.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just always that hanging over you. So you get very paranoid about every little pimple or spot, and you're running to the doctor, or not. It's just going and getting tested. Like, how many times have you? When were you last tested? You're always getting tested. So there was a certain fatalistic element that we all have, if we were lucky enough to even live through it. So I tend to have a rather dark sense of humor, and I've always used humor for everything, as a defense, as an excuse, as a means. Now even now a means to make a couple bucks. Well, that's nice. So I don't. I think I'm just like at my very core, I'm a survivor. So I just remember, it's funny, when I was a kid, I loved Agatha Christie, and I remember 10 Little Indians, or 10 Little Indians. And I so related to that, even as a child, going to that. It was just fascinating, going well, gee, you want to be the last little Indian standing. Not knowing what would come. But to your point about COVID, oh my gosh, well over 500,000 Americans died while Trump is president. I mean, totally bungled it. No,
yep, absolutely.
Let's not. We don't want to hear any reimaginations of what happened. He was on TV every day saying ridiculous things.
Let's take some pneumonia and put it up here for bleach.
Yeah. So and it would be over a million would die, and statistically, it's just even worse than AIDS, easier to get than AIDS. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They did come up with a treatment. There are still people now who have long COVID. I know a number of people who have long COVID, and that's terrible. They're not doing any research on that at all. They're very, very little. But the parallels, I've written some things about this, are incredible. You can just connect the dots and just see it. How people responded to it, the stigma. I mean, my God, there's a stigma if you got vaccinated.
Yeah.
Right? This is that. It's this
Republican president each time.
Yeah, and they're going, okay, and how many Republicans died? I mean, there's never going to be a study on that. They've lost their own voters, given what happened recently. But still, every life is important. I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, or independent. It's every life has value, and just how it was really the same thing. It was just insignificant when you're seeing, on television, they have to bring in more trailer trucks, to store the bodies. Oh my God! And it was just acceptable. It was acceptable, and Americans have just no memory of anything.
They have very short-term memories.
So that's why it's really important that with your show, that for younger people to know this history. Go ahead.
So here we are. It's the week after the election, and the man who bungled Trump, who bungled COVID and so many other things, is now going to be president again. as someone who has lived through all this shit, like it really is all this shit, what's your advice for someone who is, they may just have come out 10 years ago and it's been pretty cool since they've come out, and now they're talking about rolling back rights for queer Americans. How do you deal, Duane? Like, what do you do?
I think it's not as if gay people are ever going to be bred away.
No,
right? I mean, I'm sure
you can't legalize. You
to,
can't legalize your way out of this.
You can't. And so, I think it's just the sense of community in that we all need to. I don't get the kumbaya moment of like coming together, but it is just like through AIDS. It's checking in on everybody, because right now people are fucking freaking out. And there are people. I've talked to people who stayed in bed for 2 or 3 days.
Yes.
After Tuesday, it's like I just got up, and I see a lot of people in the store. I see hundreds of people over a weekend. I talk to all of them, but people want to talk. People want it. We have a very strong gay clientele, but straight as well. People want to talk. People want to know that they're not alone in this. So this is our one in this just takeover and perhaps the end of democracy. And it just amazes me that and I'm a total news junkie, go like listen to MSNBC. It's like, well, there's the next election. Do you really think there's going to be a next election? Not unless we get we're going to have to get our asses together. So, today, for this week, check back with me. But for this week, it's checking in on everybody. It's just, how are you? How are you doing? Do you need anything? Do you want to talk? Do you want to get some coffee? Just that, and start expanding your base of friends.
Right.
That's what it's going to take. It's the numbers, and we have the numbers. We know we have the numbers. We know we're on the right side of history. We know we have to save one another, and that's what Stonewall was about. That's what Larry Kramer was about. That's what ACT UP was about. Is that we have to save our own ass. And I totally understand that there's lots of people who just don't really see it yet, and that's okay. But as a student of the Weimar Republic in Germany, I kind of think that's just what happened.
Well, it is actually what had happened.
Because we had a good run. But
also too, like, when people are oppressed, it's not like it happens all at once. It generally happens step by step. So you get used to the oppression, and then they take the next step and take the next step. And I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. There's also that part of me that is vindictive and like, okay, you voted for him. Absolutely. You deserve everything you get. I have no sympathy for you. I will get back my empathy and sympathy, but right at this moment, it's not quite there.
I'm totally with you on that. It's like, you made your bed, now sleep in it.
Yeah.
Empathy is one of my favorite words. Favorite words, because once you walk in someone else's shoes, then you understand what their life is about. And without empathy, that simply does not happen. And you're absolutely right. This is, again, the parallels, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts, and it's a woman's right to just basic health care, for God's sake.
Yes.
Right. And they'll probably put a moratorium on any future gay marriages. We'll start there, and then no more gay marriages.
Well, we'll talk after the podcast, because I was talking to my lawyer today about that, but I don't want to get into that now. But I do want to find out, did you have a coming out song?
I do, and it's it's Yoko Ono's "Hell in Paradise."
Ah,
and
interesting. You're somebody who actually likes. Yoko Ono.
There are a lot of people that like Yoko
Okay.
Ono.
Okay.
And um, uh, read the lyrics to that song.
Okay, I will. I'll do that
Read
for
the
you.
lyrics to that song, and you do, or post it on your website. And
Okay,
it's like,
I'll do
you're
that.
like, I can't sit listening to her. That's fine, but she got it. She
Yeah.
saw it. She's a really smart woman. She's a
Mhm.
very smart woman, and
Mhm.
so so anything like, oh, okay,
She's 90, you know.
Yes, yes.
We were just actually we were just talking about Yoko Ono the other day, and I looked at how old she was. It's like, how old is she? And she's
I have a brief Yoko Ono story if you want it.
we don't have time. I got to get you to the next question.
Okay, sorry.
All right. So, a book or a movie that really changed your perspective on things?
Well, the book was Andrew Holleran's Dancer from the Dam.
Mhm.
That's just a classic. I just would just reread it, and it's gay men in New York. Going
During when?
pre-AIDS.
Okay.
Pre-AIDS. Going to the Pines, going to Fire Island. It's just beautifully written. It's funny. It's like I don't even remember the sex scene so much as just how he would describe like the foliage when they're driving to Fire Island or taking the train or whatever. Just and it captures a point in time in gay men's lives. Again, before AIDS and
AIDS.
And it's in some ways now in my later years I've tried to replicate that experience. I've had a place in New York for a number of years now. I wanted to be one of those characters. So it really did touch me. I just wanted to be a creative gay person in the village.
Well, I think you've achieved that. I think you are a creative gay person. When I first was going to introduce you, I was like, he seems very Renaissance-y to me. I was going to say like a Renaissance man because you've done a lot of different things. And, I think that a life well lived is when you've done a bunch of different things in your life, because I've done a bunch of different things too. And I feel like I've lived a good life up to this point. And how would you describe your life now?
I would very similar to yours in that I've tried all types of things because I've wanted to. A lot of things I did, it didn't have really anything to do with money. If I made money, that was great. But I just wanted to do it. So I really no regrets. And another little one line I have for myself is I think I roll big dice. And you do too. And you're going like,
okay.
Well, I'm not sure where this is going, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
As my friends joke that there's a gay man inside me desperate to get out because I love Broadway shows. I have seen, like, my mother loved, I was from Connecticut. We went to Broadway all the time. My first show was Jesus Christ Superstar when I was 8. What's your favorite Broadway show? We'll end there. So what's your favorite?
Easiest one, Sunset Boulevard.
And
I just saw the most recent production on Broadway 2 weeks ago.
My favorite was, I saw Cabaret on Broadway with what's his name? The Scottish guy.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. It was the best. Cabaret to me is sort of actually apropos for these times now that I think about it. But that production of Cabaret just blew me away. But it was also right when I was deciding to come out and leave my ex-husband now and all that. And so the whole part about queerness and about they did the way they went to the gas chambers and everything like that. It was just an amazing, like, that has been the most touching musical that I have ever seen. And I saw I've seen other productions of it, but that drive me crazy. I can't remember his name, but Alan
Cummings.
Thank you.
coming. And that is Weimar, Germany.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
Weimar
that was the
Republic.
Weimar German Republic.
And I had a chance to see I Am a Camera, because
Mhm.
that's the really the prequel to it,
Mhm.
and which hadn't been staged in 40 years. I don't know why, but people should read it, and you should read it.
I will read that. I'll put
Yeah,
that on my list.
I Am a Camera.
Well, Duane, it was wonderful talking to you today. Thank you so much for
Please.
sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much for all you've done to make mid-century modern. We didn't even get to talk about that.
What's that?
Yes, but to put mid-century modern on the map. If people want to find you and look you up, how did they do that?
So if you want to spot the store, you can go to BAM Chicago.com. The book sellingdeadpeoplesthings.com has its own site. There's a Etsy store as well. Dead People's Things.
I'll have to look at that.
And so it's vintage related products that have spun off out of me. Yeah, I'm on Substack. I've got a column called "It's All My Fault," and that's in the Village View in New York. That comes out once a month, and I'm the Uber columnist there. How did that happen?
I don't know. You're probably funny.
I don't know. And when I'm not,
Duane,
they tell you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really, really appreciate it. And let's hope things are better than we think they're going to be.
Yeah. And then let's make them better.
Yes, let's make them better. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA plus stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.